Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, I'm a programmer at TIFF now, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Alex Lehmann, a writer and director whose credits include Blue Jay, Paddleton, and Meet Cute. His latest, Acidman, is a drama starring Thomas Hayden Church as a solitary fellow who spends his days trying to make contact with extraterrestrials until his long-estranged daughter shows up at his door with some personal news. It's now available on digital and on demand in the US and Canada, and you should check it out. Alex picked Edson Oda's 9 Days, a frankly brilliant metaphysical drama starring Winston Duke as Will, a man who spends his time in a little house in the middle of nowhere, auditioning souls to be born into the world and keeping tabs on the people they become. It's an unfussy drama that places its lead in an entirely convincing universe, surrounding him with a supporting cast that includes Benedict Wong, Zazie Beetz, Bill Skarsgård, and Tony Hale. And despite some obvious debts to Hirokazu Koreeda's Afterlife, 9 Days becomes its own remarkable thing. If you haven't seen it, you really should. This is Someone Else's Movie.
Well, 9 Days is, it's exactly the kind of movie that I like to make. And I think it was constructed in a better way than I could have ever hoped to make myself. It's just a really great excuse to talk about philosophy, existentialism, empathy, sensitivity, why we're here and what we can do, to make the most of our time. But the premise that's built around it it's just brilliant and reminds me of like a really great like Borges short story or something that just blows your mind and makes you question everything and appreciate life itself.
That's a good way to put it. Did you see it? Were you lucky enough? Because I know it opened in 2020. Were you lucky enough to see it in a theater? I watched it at home myself.
I didn't get to see it in a theater. It kind of, I feel bad for the movie. It went under the radar. It's so good, and it deserves so much, so many more accolades and so much more viewership than it got. I saw it because I wanted to cast Winston Duke in something, and it's some mutual friends that actually made the film, and they sent me a link and said, you have to see this. And I watched it with my wife, and we just looked at each other like, what the heck? And I try to get people to watch it all the time. And unfortunately, as excellent as this movie is, it suffers, that same not a Marvel movie syndrome that so many great films do. And I think that the other shame is, I don't know if you see this, but like a lot of critics, they'll talk about, and audience members, like movies that have come out in the last year or two, people will key in and go like, this was obviously a pandemic movie. I can tell because there were like 4 people in like 2 locations out in the woods. And, first of all, it's like, yeah, screw you. It was, because it was the pandemic. Like, what do you expect? Like you're welcome, by the way. But this movie was made before the pandemic, but unfortunately it came out, at a time that everybody was really resistant to the idea of being reminded of isolation. And so I think the timing was just rather unfortunate on that end.
Yeah. Looking back and realizing that it played Sundance just, weeks before the world ended, basically, it feels almost prescient that way, because not only is it about isolation, but so much of it is about, the things that we were all trapped alone with, questioning who you are, what you want to do, where you're going. And to see a film that is also so clearly indebted to Afterlife, to Koreeda, and wrestling with those things from a Western perspective, from a very American perspective, because, you have this weird ragged individualism thing going on. And to do it all in this quiet, philosophical, open way with such an amazing, and I went back and read my little review that I wrote at the time, and it's just because we couldn't even talk the editors into doing a feature review. I read it over again, and I could feel myself straining to pack all the ideas into 200 words. I could not say enough. I literally didn't have room, but I could not say enough about what Winston Duke is doing, because it is.
Yeah.
I've seen him be eccentric. I've seen him be big. I've seen him be self-aware. I've seen all of these things from him, but I've never seen him hold himself in the way he does in this. And then when it finally pours out of him, it's just absolutely shattering. And I remember, as you say, it was almost like pulling teeth to get people to go see it. Even once it was available, I put together my top 10 list at the end of the year, and it's on there. And a number of people, friends of mine, are like, what is that? I don't even know what that is. And it's like, well, I was shouting about it in the summer, but clearly you had other priorities. And I think they probably still haven't caught up to it, which is just a heartbreaker. It is such a good movie.
Well, I think, there were those couple of months in 2020 when we were all like, yes, and introspection and self-reflection and like quiet moments and like, let's really ask ourselves the questions. And then like everybody got past that. We're like, okay, and now let's do everything. Go to Europe, like get as far away possibly from being inside our heads and inside our souls. Like we got enough of that. Like check that box for the next 5 years. So yeah, the time is a shame, but it's such a brilliant film. And I like that it's because it's a very Pixar film in some ways. It's just the tone, and I guess you could compare it to Soul, right? Maybe that's the way to pitch it to people. It's like, hey, you like Soul, right? Like this is like Soul but live action, just a little less upbeat and humorous, but way more fulfilling and poignant. But I like films that can take a really honest look at the struggle. I mean, every one of my films has at least a dash of ennui, if not, some sort of internal struggle, existentialism, all those questions that I've not been able to stop asking myself since I was like 5 years old on the swing set. Uh-huh. But it's not a downer. It faces things in a way more realistic way than most films are willing to do. So it's brave in that way. But man, if nothing else, the end of that film just makes you want to live. And Zazie Beetz' character, she makes you want to appreciate even the littlest best things in them. She's Amelie, right? Like that's if she would have gone on, right, to live out in the real world, like if her soul had been selected, she would have been Amelie. And everybody loves Amelie. Like that's the movie that reminds you to appreciate the good things. So yeah, the setting is a little more simple and quiet, and I think that scares people. Quiet scares people, but I think it's fulfilling.
Yeah. I think the other problem too with explaining it to people, with selling it to people, at least for me, was if you start explaining it, it sounds just incredibly dull. I mean, you picture a void, right? Like people just talking about nothing. And what it does instead, and again, you start telling people about the production design and they make a face, but the idea that you're watching someone just bathe in regret and sit in his own sadness that he won't express or won't acknowledge, and the world it's not threadbare exactly. It looks pretty comfortable, but it's in the middle of it's in the middle of a desert, which probably doesn't even exist. And the way that so much of the film is designed to show us someone who hasn't developed, who's willingly just sort of stayed still to do this work for whatever reason, but also all the technology is old and analog, all the equipment is a little worn. There's a sense of forever. There's a sense of eternity about this. And it's also understated. The incalculable distance that Kyo has to come to visit him. And it's so great to hear Benedict Wong speaking with his own accent, because he never gets to do it. He's a Northerner, and he never gets to be a Northerner. He's always putting on the English affect. And here this working class kind of Joe job thing they're both doing, which is, when you pull back even the tiniest bit, the most important thing that anyone can do for anyone.
Yes. But it's just a cog in the wheel.
Yeah. And we never see the wheel. That's what I love about it. Yeah. Like everything is so distant and so removed that it could be hell. It isn't, I don't think. I don't think Will is in hell, even in a hell of his own design. I think he is doing this because he feels he has to, but there's meaning to it.
Yeah.
And then they hit you with this concept, which sounds so hokey and goofy,
Yeah.
and is just presented as, well, you don't exist yet. Let's find out who you are.
Yeah. The problem is the pitch, the premise sounds like a student film.
Mm.
The execution and how well it actually works is like Oscar level, or at least like, when Oscars were a little bit more meaningful level. No, there's some good movies still winning Oscars, but like the less commercial or whatever,
Sure,
Sundance
sure.
winning. You call it a Sundance level premise in its execution. It's just, yeah, in the pitch, it does kind of make you, and how threadbare everything is. It presents as, oh, this could be like a really, you know, entry level student film, just in the premise, just because it's like, are you kidding me? That can't work. That's going to be heady, or it's going to be, talking down to you, or reductive. And I think part of the reason it works, I don't know Edson Oda, the filmmaker, but it feels like he just completely bared his soul in this, and I feel very, very protective of a man I've never met. I don't think I've even like heard him speak, so I can't like emotionally connect with him beyond the film, but I just want to like protect him from our toxic, just dangerous film industry. I'm like, yeah, you're like the main character, Will, here. Like, I like this world doesn't deserve you. The world of cinema doesn't deserve you, and it's going to eat you up. And you should be making your art in a very protected, safe place. Like, I want you to be able to do that Walt Whitman speech, and I don't want anybody to hurt you while you do it. Because, by the way, maybe the ending is maybe the second best ending to a modern indie film I've ever seen. There's only one other film that I think maybe like does a better ending, and that's Another Round.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I can
And
see that.
and I'll say that only because it's a little easier to jump to the end of Another Round on any given day and just watch that ending and get up and go for it in life. But it was such a well constructed ending, and it just catches you off guard, and it makes you, for as much as there is this or not afterlife, but I guess before life premise for the entire film. I know we in a way we know that it is the movie is also about Will and about his past life, but the brilliant thing about the ending, and that I'm trying not to give away too much while also like telling the audience why they have to see this,
Of course.
is like just that end scene makes you realize how much this is about not just the pre-life, but it is also about Will's journey. And like you realize, okay, so heaven movies, afterlife movies don't work usually, because it's like, what's the point if like everything is possible and life is infinite? Then like nothing matters. It's almost like a metaverse movie where it's like sometimes they can work, but like if you really kind of start thinking about it, you're like, well, if there's infinite versions of everything, then everything does happen. And so like, who cares? There's a version of me that's happy today, there's a version of me who's sad today, and like, don't bother making the sad version happy. Like, they're all going to exist. That's the point. But so the pre-life, and by the way, I think that's how we should pitch this movie to people, you and I, is go like, listen, afterlife movies don't work. This is a pre-life movie, which makes, there's so many stakes because of that. But the other thing that's really cool is like, the stakes aren't just for the one soul who's going to live in real life. We're also realizing, and I think it is that Akio character that's like, somebody says it, I forget who, but somebody says like, what if like there are other people watching us, and we're and it makes you realize like, oh yeah, like there is a purpose to like what these characters are doing, as well as this place that they're hopefully going to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting a little bit broad. I can't give away too much, but
yeah, but that's the problem, right? You cannot explain to people why it's so exhilarating without talking about the ending. And it isn't even based on the premise. It's not even about who gets picked, right? Like, that's not what the film is about.
No.
It's about this explosion of feeling from out of a monotone. But the monotone, it's not an insult to say that the film maintains a very level balance for the first 80 odd minutes. It's just drawing us closer, and the softness and the way it is so gentle with the emotional stakes, and letting us sort of sit with Will when he realizes that one of his charges has died. Because that's clearly more meaningful to him than it is to anyone else in the room, which I find really fascinating too. Like he has died, as we discover. I mean, it's not a real surprise.
Yeah.
I think it's just sort of baked in again. This is someone who has lived and is deciding if other souls are worthy of that journey.
Yeah.
And the fact that he is so distraught, even though he won't express it, that this affects him when Amanda dies in an accident, is something that like Winston Duke just wears in his neck for the rest of the movie. He's just carrying this in his silence. And finally, when it comes out, he's grieving for her. He's grieving for himself. He's grieving for this other thing that's happening that he has no control over separately, because he made a decision for one thing that has an effect on the others. And I don't know that I've ever seen anything like it. It's the one time where the film almost sort of, because of the desert setting and because of the sunset and the way that it's shot, it sort of almost tilts into Terrence Malick, but that's so not what Terrence Malick is about. It's its own thing. And I'm reeling and looking for things to connect it to. The ending of Another Round is another perfect example. That's never been done before. Not in this way. And, people, this film ends with a dance number. Yeah, but it's the culmination emotionally of everything we've seen. And it's an interpretation the same way that the dance in Another Round is, right? Because these aren't his words. He's delivering something. Yeah. But it's got that quality of this heartbeat, this discovery, this moment where I honestly don't know that I've ever heard those words spoken that way before, or that they should have been. It's so incredible and indescribable. And it's not what the movie's about, but it is. Yeah. And it feels like a little miracle.
Yeah. I mean, it's essentially, it's a story of a guy who got a chance to live on Earth, a soul that got a chance to live on Earth, was too sensitive, couldn't handle it, took his own life. He's basically sworn to himself that he never wants to let that happen again. And so he's going to be very intentional in which souls he selects to allow to live, because he wants to make sure that he doesn't let anyone suffer the same fate as himself. And the beginning of the movie is him basically realizing he screwed up. He's allowed someone else as sensitive as he was to live and not be able to withstand the difficulty, the harshness of life. And so he's like thinking, I have to double down and be even more protective of that. And it's basically, and so we think the whole time, like, this is what he needs to right that wrong. And in truth, the wrong is being righted by Zazie Beetz, right? She's the one that's going, hey man, but if you wall up as much as you do, Winston Duke, then we don't get to see the real Winston Duke, and then you're not living. And so you're not living in this place of not living, instead of like just letting it go and being an artist again. And so she teaches him how to live in this ambiguous pre-life world. It's oh God, yeah. I don't know. It sounds so heady. People just watch it. It's just, you'll feel so much. I feel like we're two college students smoking a joint, talking about like, the cosmos might be in our fingernails, man. Like, it's so hard to really nail it down. But like, thank God it's not like some flying woman with a cape shooting purple lasers at some flying dude with a cape shooting red lasers. Like,
wizard hands is how I describe it. Like people just making wizard hands at each other across a big digital scape. Yeah. But and the other thing too that fascinates me about those movies is that they make these movies possible because every single person in this film, maybe not Tony Hale, has been associated with some sort of superhero or giant franchise. Like Bill Skarsgård is in he's the monster in it and in John Wick 4, and Zazie Beetz was in Joker and Deadpool 2, right? And Benedict Wong is Wong, the Doctor Strange and the Avengers and all of that, and then of course Winston Duke is in Black Panther, and all of them are charismatic, lively, interesting people who I think, are happier doing this than they are in the other things. But the other things make it possible for him, like Winston Duke can do Black Panther and Us back to back and then pick the script up and go, no, I'm taking the time and I'm making this thing next. And because Black Panther 2 needs him, that can be negotiated. And the funding can happen. And I was doing a little tiny bit of research on this and I was stunned. A24 passed on this? This is so A24. This is like catnip to them. But it just didn't spark to them somehow. And Searchlight also turned it down. And so they had to go and put it together independently. And Sony Pictures Classics didn't buy it until a month or 2 weeks after Sundance.
Well, I think it's not cool enough for A24, and I don't mean that in any sort of a reductive, or it's no insult. It's just it's not there's no hip element to it. It's just it's not even like emotionally aware in the way that's trending on TikTok right now. It's just real, and I think that like that the lack of filters doesn't work for A24. No offense to A24, but like to me it's like the Instagram of like Instagram filter of movies. Like even like their logos like just looks like a bunch of Instagram filters. If there isn't the filter, if there isn't some sort of enhancing filter to a story, I don't think that necessarily fits A24. And they've done a brilliant job of making things cool or interesting through a lens that usually has some kind of fresh POV or energy, but this one just lays it bare, and I think that scares people.
Hey, it's Norm, interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my twice-weekly newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. Last week I wrote about Universal's unrated edition of Megan, or M3gan, or whatever, and Criterion's new releases of Ruben Östlund's Triangle of Sadness and Steve McQueen's Small Axe films. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link at the Semcast Twitter account. Look, if I don't do this, my head falls off. Come check it out. I wonder if that's it too, like the pitch of, here, we're going to ask you to think about your choices in life for 2 hours while you watch these very attractive people think about their motivations for existing. And there's a horrible Instagram version of this. It's exactly the thing you were just describing. And someone will probably try to make it in 2 years.
Yeah. It'll be a genre piece.
Yeah. It'll be hidden, right? Like it'll be cloaked. And yeah, as you say, the fact that this doesn't do anything to disguise what it's about is the power. It's why it works. It's earnest, and I don't know that people like earnest anymore. And it's still the thing that I respond to the most. I mean, After Sun kind of proves that there's a way to do it, which is also an A24 release. But there are ways to just, wrestle with emotional truths and trauma and pain and glory in the fact that we have the people we love while they're around. My dad died last fall, and I saw After Sun like a month before it, and have really been kind of mustering up to watch it again, given what it's about. But also, this was a film that I don't know that I could have handled it after. I can now, because I've already seen it and I know where it goes, and there's that part of your brain that says it's going to be all right. But, oh, wow. It's so tangled up with the person watching the film. Like it's watching me back in ways that few films do.
Well, I think we're conditioned to want to be distracted. I mean, it's a survival mechanism to a certain extent to distract ourselves and to not have to face truth for too long. And that's cool. I'm down with that too. By the way, sometimes I watch cartoons at the end of the day just so that like my brain can unwind and so that I can sleep. And like I need those endorphins. I need to feel good. I need to feel happy as well. And sometimes real is happy and sometimes real is not happy. So I get it. But I also think that marketing is just a lot easier when you can package something in a higher concept. And truth be told, I'm searching for higher concepts, bigger concepts to make my movies. I still want to make them as honest and as human as possible, but I get the fact that like if you have some sort of element that draws audiences in, like the second to last movie I made was called Meet Cute,
I
and
was
had
about
like
to say, yeah.
like a tanning bed time machine, Groundhog Day element. I mean, like we don't stay there, you know. People think like, oh, it's going to be Palm Springs. Like it kind of, the entry point is Palm Springs, but we go to some other places. But I get it that like the difference between that versus my other movies was like you could just say Tanning Bed Time Machine, Groundhog Day, rom-com, and people knew what it was, and there was a comfort in like watching something that they, you know, feel like they'd already seen before.
And it's how you trick people into the meat, getting to the thing that you want. I recently saw an ensemble drama with just a bunch of moving parts that are all vaguely recognizable, but it's the means by which it tricks you into getting what the real story is. And that's perfectly respectable. You know, like you think about the way, you know, Adam McGuigan's Exotica defined a certain type of chronological scrambling that all leads to a single place. And then everybody started doing it. It's the defining plot mechanism of Miramax Indies from 1995 to 2003. And that gives us the everything is connected narratives that are Babel and all, and you know, like all of those other stories. And they're still coming through now. And Crash, which won the Oscar. And if you strip out the mechanisms and you just have the dialogue and the bones of it, you can go terribly flat, right? Like if you're not skilled enough, if you're not Edson Oda, that movie's dull.
Yeah.
And here he's just 9 days uses space and time and distance and even the way the characters are positioned opposite one another, which is, I think, another reason people might have thought it was a pandemic movie, because there is space between everyone. And it's like, it's a visual motif about Will's inability to connect, but it's also just this great, stark, powerful visual, people outdoors with space between them, that I guess does now have a different meaning post 2020.
Yeah.
But yeah, things like Meet Cute are the better version of that, the better version of a device being used as a lever to trick people in. Plus you also have Pete Davidson, which immediately makes people assume things about who he is, which I think is great.
Yeah. But the goal, the North Star for me in filmmaking at this point, knowing how hard it is to get people to watch things, but also how pointless it is to make something that has no nutritional value or just exists 10 times already, is, you know, I had this realization, like Bob Marley, right? Now, people still listen to his music, right? He's long gone. And they associate his music with partying, keggers, joints.
Yeah, sure.
And that's great, right? His music will live on forever, because as soon as you hear it, you just think, what dorms are the party in? But like there are amazingly important lyrics that are hidden within that sugar coating of fun and upbeat. If Bob Marley had said, allow me, like, can I talk to you about like racism? Can I talk to you about like slavery and how we took people from Africa? Like you'd be like, oh, dude, it's a Friday evening. Like I kind of, you know, I wanted to like go have some fun. Could we talk about this like on Monday? But instead he just lures you in with this fun where you might not even, some people might, for like the first 300 times they've heard the song, and they have, the 301st time they finally listen to lyrics and go, oh shit, got it. And that is such a better way, I think, to feed people nutrition. Is like, you know, and we owe it, we're entertainers at the end of the day, and I have to remind myself, like, I gotta keep finding ways to like give the audience something, not just say, hey, allow me to bring you down to this place of introspection, right? Allow me, like, I want to make things real. I want to talk about like growth. I want to share a little bit about myself. Like, I think I do, you know, owe them some fun, some distraction and catharsis. And in the middle there of that whole fun sandwich, you know, to do the thing that I've wanted to do with every one of my movies. So that's the goal moving forward. And I mean, you know, with Acidman, there was a little bit of that, because that film started as something very, very simple that had no sci-fi twist to it whatsoever. And I was like trying to figure out, like, how do I possibly like make people interested in this? It was originally father-son story too, but father, like, how do I bring people into this character story how do I make this about something bigger? And that story. I mean, E.T. was originally there was no alien in Spielberg's original story about E.T. It was just a story about a family facing the divorce and the
Yeah.
father leaving them, and it was just the emotional trauma, and people were like, it's a beautiful story, Stephen, but people aren't going to watch it. And he goes, what if I put an alien in it?
And I wanted to get to Acidman as well because it is effectively it's about a man alone in the wilderness with his thoughts and his guilt, even though that's not how he presents. And I did this when you picked 9 Days. It's like, oh yeah, I can see some connections. There's some mirroring there, but
Yeah,
it's about responsibility in a completely different way. But I can see it. Like I can see the bridge between them.
yeah, and I think empathy too. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
it's about recognizing where somebody's at and finding ways to meet them there. I mean, going back to 9 Days one more time, like, Zazie Beetz leaving those post-it notes everywhere, saying like, yeah, you didn't pick me, but like, that's okay. I share this other bond with you. And even if it's ephemeral, it means something to me. And I will take another step forward. I'm not just going to expect you to take that lean in. I'll step forward if I'm capable of doing it. That I think we owe that to each other whenever we can, instead of just playing the victim. And so Acid Man, a lot of that is these two people that are trying to find ways to lean in and step in and connect where they could have just, and at some points do, but could have completely just shut down and said like, I don't like the way things have played out for myself, or I don't like the way you've treated me, or I'm too sensitive. And so it's just easier for me to shut you out. I like it when people do the work and find ways to connect. My God, we need that, don't we?
Yeah, and having an idealized, well, I guess the reverse of an idealized father-daughter relationship, where it just, again, like Thomas Hayden Church just is so good at doing nothing and having everything going on underneath. I'm the moments of hesitation, those moments where you can sort of feel him weighing whether or not to respond, and then realizing he doesn't know how to respond. Like he's made the decision to commit, but then he still has to figure out what to say, and it passes in a second in his eyes. But it's like 9 Days. You're just drawn closer and closer to this person through his inaction, because there's something coming. You just don't know what shape it will take. And casting that and directing, I mean, when do you know that'll work? When did you know he was the guy?
Well, that's a really cool. I love that connection to the Will character in 9 Days, because they're both these guys that are trying to protect themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think with Thomas, well, there were two things needed with the Acidman character. First of all, it's a character who, this person has really, they're reclusive, and partially because they're protecting themselves from the world, which has handed them enough losses and bruises and cuts that they're just like, I'm gonna be happier, living in a protected state. But also, I think it's also about a character who is worried about hurting others and maybe knows that they're rough around the edges. So Thomas is Acid Man to a certain extent. He's been living isolated on his ranch for quite a while, and he is such a good dude and has such a big heart, and yet he also is he's sensitive, and he's got his own share of relationships that haven't always worked out, and sometimes it's easier for him to be tending his cattle than dealing with someone else that just doesn't make sense to him, right? Like that he just feels like, am I, that whole like, am I crazy? Like like is there anyone else in the world that's like me or that thinks like me? And because he feels so much, and because he can be so reactive, usually in a funny way, by the way. Maybe that's my favorite thing about him, and both in real life and and the way he plays the character is like, when he kind of goes quiet and you see his eyes, you're just thinking like, is he gonna punch me or is he gonna make a joke? It could go either way at any second, and you just like find yourself leaning in. You're like, I'm down for whatever happens, because I'm just intrigued to see what happens next with you. but yeah, I think it was about casting a sensitive man who hadn't given up on life, but has built up some barriers so that he doesn't have to feel quite too much on any given day. He doesn't do a ton of press. He doesn't put himself out there. Uh, there's reasons why he protects himself. And to be honest, it was quite a journey trying to pull him out of that seclusion and drag him out to Oregon to put himself out there on camera. It was great.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with Duke, right? Like it's a revelation. It's a performance that I hadn't seen Thomas Hayden Church give before, and I've been a fan. I watched Wings. I remember like the broadness that he brought to that character, but also the like that kind of weird sly savant thing that he was doing, and how after Wings he immediately picked something like Ned and Stacy, where he gets to play an abrasive asshole, because that's just one more way of distinguishing the character. But also I got the sense that in neither case did we really get him. It's like the thing about TV is it's supposed to reveal a character in the actor that you can then reuse repeatedly, but he's so not interested in that. And here it's just this, it's not confusion, right? Like it's reflexive. It's what you said. It's self-protection. And he found a way to make it work in the character that we're watching, but also I did get the sense that we're seeing something of him. The same way Will and Winston Duke are probably very close to the same person, even if they don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. It's a rawness that has to be protected, but if you give them opportunities to just shine and kind of come out, then they get to share something about themselves that very few people get to see, and they come alive too, right? To see Thomas's character come to life as he talks about what the meaning of extraterrestrial life is for him. It feels spiritual. And I think that was important for me as well. And I've always been a bit of a skeptic, but part of my life's journey is definitely to appreciate people with different ideas and their different ideas, as long as they're not harmful to anyone. To be less judgmental of those ideas, and to just appreciate what those ideas mean to the individual, and how it gives their life more purpose, and how it brings them to life, how it actually motivates them and allows them to find whatever it is that they need. I love the idea that, like, I wrote this character with Chris Dowling, my co-writer, that is someone that I would have probably ridiculed 5 years ago. And when I guess we wrote it like 5 years ago. It's like 10 years ago, but the idea that I mean, we were very sensitive in trying to find the beauty in what this guy believed. And I don't know, some of your listeners, probably many of your listeners, believe in UFOs. I still am asked the question sometimes, like, especially after this film, like, well, do you believe in UFOs now? And my answer is, I want there to be UFOs. Whereas I don't know. I still don't know, but I didn't used to like need there to be. And now it's like, my goodness, please. Yes. Like anything else to life that makes it bigger and grander and more surprising.
Yeah. Something that punctures our narcissism as a species would not be the worst thing.
No.
And everybody said, like, it's the Watchmen versus ID4 argument, right? Like the aliens would just unite us in war against the aliens. Like, probably for a little bit, but then maybe we talk to them. And I think like the biggest, somebody, probably Carl Sagan, someone way smarter than I am, said once that like the most obvious proof of the existence of extraterrestrials is that they're not bothering us, that they know enough to leave Earth alone, which I like. But I hope I'm around with First Contact. I don't know what form it will take. Maybe it's already happened, but I think to be part of that, there are so, like, I think, other than electricity, I don't think that there's been a moment that's united. Even the pandemic managed to splinter us more than it brought us together. I would love to see what happens. Hopefully they're friendly, or at least ambivalent, but I think Lloyd needs there to be something else. And I get that. It's the same. And it's basically his spirituality, right? Like it's a sort of belief that has become a necessity in his existence.
Hmm.
I think it's preposterous to imagine we're the only life in the universe. I also kind of would understand if maybe we are the level of technological advancement that's around right now. So that would explain why no one else is visiting. But that's also the narcissism I was talking about, right? Like we everybody always says this is a great time to be alive because it's true. It always is better than the past, but there's so much more to come. And yeah, I am an incredibly cynical person about humanity, but about the other stuff, I'm pretty much an optimist. I want it to be true.
It would be, yeah. I'm nervous as to what would happen if extraterrestrial life, came down and started doing business with us. Because business could be bad, but I mean, even just like a definitive flyby, right? I'm not talking about even the footage in our film is, we didn't CG it. We actually, people filmed these pretty convincing movements of lights in the sky that feel like that seems, I don't know how to explain that. But if there was a definitive one that we all got to see, like think about if you've ever seen the Northern Lights with a group of people or a meteor shower or something, everybody's cynicism turns off for that kind of stuff. You just start looking up at the sky and everything feels bigger than you. And it puts us in our place, not in a bad way, but it puts us in our place where we stop feeling like we're the end all be all. And if there was like a definitive flyby that everybody would go like, yep, that was definitely an alien species. And that was, some technology we don't even understand. It came and it went and nobody, said anything about like, it would have to skywrite, like, we are not China. If it was definitive, then for a little while, I think, like the world would be able to operate in a place of just a little more humility, and maybe it would allow us to be more curious about everything else instead of opinionated, right? Because like right now we have too many opinions about too many things, and not only do we disagree about them, but we're just certain about everything. And it would be really nice for something like that to, because when I saw the Northern Lights, it just made me feel like curious about everything. Like, what else is in the world that like I could, because I thought I knew what the Northern Lights were. I'd seen pictures, but then when I saw them in person, I was like, I have a lot of living to do left. like there's a lot of things I need to experience that I thought I understood what they were because they were on a screensaver. I like the idea of things pushing us to being more curious instead of comfortable. Yeah,
that makes sense. And I know we're on the clock on this one, so I will get us to the final question, which is basically, and I think you've kind of already answered it, but is there anything of the movie you chose that's impacted your own work or affected? Is there something that you've borrowed or referenced or outright stolen from 9 Days that has made it into your toolbox?
Let's see. The only thing, well, you know what? So the ending of Acidman, oh God, I mean, I want people to watch this movie, but I'm gonna be honest, I don't think I stuck the landing as well as 9 Days did, and I don't think I stuck the landing as well as Another Round did. But I learned something about how to end a film watching 9 Days, and I certainly pursued that. I'm very proud of and like the ending of Acidman, but I want to keep pursuing that ending that like kind of elevates the entire film. And if you can get people to watch a movie, but then you give them this ending that goes, not only did we add some sort of resolution to the movie you've been watching, but now we're also presenting to you the theory that maybe this movie was also about something else. That I think that's a cool way to surprise an audience and to give them an ending that keeps them thinking about the film.
Yeah, it's that little nudge of ecstasy at the end. It just says, look, see, this is this too.
Yeah.
I love that stuff.
Yeah. I can't wait to see what Edson Oda makes next, man. I check his IMDb all the time just to see if anything's cooking. I'm a fan of his.
Reach out. Executive produce. Give him, whatever he wants. I'm in. I'll help.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to reach out to him.
My thanks to Alex Lehmann, whose new film Acidman is now on digital and on demand in the US and Canada. Thanks also to Laura Steen. She knows what she did. Alex isn't on Twitter, but you can find 9 Days on Blu-ray and DVD from Sony Pictures Home Entertainment. It's also streaming on Super Channel in Canada and on Starz and DirecTV in the US, and available to rent or buy on various VOD platforms. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 44 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps, it truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get your booster when you can. I'll see you next week.